What's up, guys? It's Evan from RiversEdgeCutlery.com. We're here at Blade Show 2021, still day one, Friday. Now we have an awesome guest for you guys. This is Larrin Thomas from KnifeSteelNerds.com. Welcome, Larrin. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Been using your website as a resource for a long time now, so it's really good to be able to put a face to the name on the site. So really appreciate you meeting here with us. How was the travel in?
Traveling was good.
Good.
No, it's a pretty short flight from Pittsburgh.
Good.
So
When did you get in?
just a couple hours ago.
Okay, so we'll make this short, we'll make this sweet, get you back to the show because there's a lot of good stuff going on. Even as things kind of wind down for the end of the day, that's really when the fun starts. So really appreciate you taking the time. Just wanted to ask you a few questions. First off, what served as the inspiration, I should say, for really getting your site started?
Well, my dad is Larrin Thomas. He's known for making Damascus steel.
Yep.
He's one of the earliest people to make stainless Damascus. And so I was around knives and steel and stuff from, basically I was a baby.
Okay.
So, and when I was a teenager, my dad started bringing me to some knife shows. And at the knife shows, there are lots of people that are out trying to sell their knives. And there are guys that are like, oh, I have this secret steel or this special heat treatment.
Yep.
I triple quench, triple normalize, triple temper. For some reason, triple is really important.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so I'd go and ask my dad, Dad, what's all this about? Like, this guy was bending his fillet knife 90 degrees. Like, that's amazing. And, my dad, he's a sharp guy. He makes Damascus steel. He had a lot of answers for me, but the fact that he did have answers for me really just meant I got more interested.
Yeah.
If my dad instead was like, oh, that stuff is just meaningless, like,
sure.
who cares? Then it probably would have killed my interest. But it gave me something to talk to my dad about and get really into.
Yep.
So I started going on different forums and things and talking about knives and getting really into it. And then later I'm graduating from high school. I did okay in high school, not straight A's,
sure.
but I'm going to junior college. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And I took a math class from a lawyer.
Okay.
So he would teach part-time at this junior college, and he was amazing. And I went from being bad at math to being really good at math. And I was like, well, maybe engineering is something that I can do.
Sure.
And I've always loved steel, metallurgy side of knives.
Yep.
So maybe I can do that as a career. And so I went to the University of Nevada and then Colorado School of Mines and got my PhD in metallurgy.
Fantastic.
And I'm working at US Steel Research and I'm enjoying it, but I have a little bit more time now that I'm done with grad school because that was a lot of time.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking like, well, maybe I should get a little more into knives. So I start going to the forums and things, but you make a post on a forum and then it's gone 2 days later.
Sure.
And so
it's buried.
And so I tried writing up a little mini article for a forum, like about the effects of cryo processing on steel. And then 2 days later, somebody started a new thread asking questions about cryo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is not working. I need like a website where there's a centralized place where you can go and learn things about steel and knives. So I started the website Knife Steel Nerds. And it's been slowly growing ever since. I came out with my book and just there's been a lot of excitement and interest and people have been great.
Absolutely. So during like the initial growth period of your site, what was the thing that was like keeping you going? Because obviously in the infancy of all sites, there's a point in time where you're like, is this going to take off? Is this going to be anything? Or is it going to be a pet project that just kind of, dwindles by the wayside? So what was keeping you going?
Well, initially, I didn't know how many people were out there that would even be interested or want to learn. My early articles were all geared directly at knife makers, and
okay.
I still write articles for knife makers, but I've gotten a little more broad over time. And so I'm like, well, how many knife makers are there even? So like if I get 100 readers, I mean that's what I'm going for anyway. And the readership just kept going steadily up.
Yep.
I did a big article on Catra edge retention. It's a special tester that they use in the industry for measuring edge retention.
Okay.
And that blew up a lot more, and then I had other research projects, and as things grew, I started a Patreon where people could donate.
Yeah. absolutely.
And that really blew up what I was able to do, because when I'm trying to convince my wife to spend a few $1,000s on this or that for research, it's a real tough sell. But so initially I didn't want to make any money on the site, and all the Patreon money goes towards research.
Yes, absolutely.
But I was like, well, I'll just tell people, give me money and I'll spend it on knife research.
Yes.
And people were excited about that. And so then, it just built on itself, because then I could do the experiments I wanted to do instead of just poring over thousands of journal articles.
Absolutely.
Which may or may not have exactly what I want in them.
Yeah.
And so, the testing, that built things more, the book built things more, and if you're patient and you have something that people get interested in, it'll just grow. And I'm not a multi-million follower YouTube or Twitch or TikTok person, but we have our niche, and you just got to be happy with what you're doing. If you get 0 readers, you have to be interested in what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of it was for me, like, I always wanted to know about this. Is bainite tougher than martensite?
Yes.
Is os tempering better than quench and temper? And I want to know that.
Yeah.
So it's not just the article. I want to do the research, both in the literature and the journal articles, and doing some new experiments. And that's the real fun. And then writing it up and getting comments of like, oh, great job, or this is great. That's just gravy.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the forums earlier, like that's kind of where you started. They can really be like the Wild West when it comes to the information that gets put out there, a lot of subjectivity. Did you, or were you surprised that when you started putting out a lot more objective content, that people really latched onto that?
I don't know about surprise. I mean, there's definitely people that are in your corner and like, oh, finally, like I've been reading these forums, I'm more confused than ever. Like I got 5 different answers, and so they're like, oh, you seem to be, like you said, an objective source, or I'll do some experiments and really show things. Sometimes even I'm surprised.
Absolutely.
Like I always thought, oh, doing this process leads to a better knife, and I tested it and I could not find a difference. That kind of stuff. So there are definitely naysayers. When a knife maker's been doing that extra process for 15 years, and he's built it up in his mind like, I'm making the best knives, and it's because I'm doing these extra steps, and then you test it and it just doesn't do it. They're not happy about it.
No.
And I understand. And so there's a real cognitive dissonance there.
Sure.
Where it's hard to get over that hump of a belief you've had for a long time.
And it might not even be malicious.
Yeah.
It might just be something that is deeply seated. Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to have some understanding of people's personalities, and when they lash out either in a minor or major way, you have to have some charity to them. And it's just like, I'm sorry, my test didn't back up what you wanted.
Listen, science is not personal.
Yeah.
It doesn't care what you feel.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, just a couple on a little bit of a lighter note. What are some of your favorite blade steels, just in general, for everyday carry blades?
Well, I love AEBL and 14C28N.
Okay.
So they've been building up more and more. 20 years ago, there was nothing available, apart from some, like you get a Mora knife in 12C27, which is a similar grade. But when it came to American custom knives and high-end manufacturer knives, they just weren't out there. They weren't looking at those kind of steels. They were inexpensive, which kind of made people not want to use them in some ways. And the compositions are also very simple. And so they would look at the composition and be like, I'd rather use 154 CM or something. But their simplicity is what makes them so good. So they've got a really fine structure because they originally developed those steels, AEBL and 13C26, for razor blades. So they needed the structure to be super fine so that you could take a really fine razor blade out of it. And so it has really high toughness and fine structure. 14C28N is kind of like an improved corrosion resistance version. With similar properties. Sandvik developed that for Kershaw because they started making 13C26 knives, and they'd get returns from customers on rust. So, these people are buying a knife and they don't care how well it cuts or sharpens or anything. Like, I got a spot of rust on this, I'm returning it.
Exactly.
So Kershaw asked Sandvik, and 14C28N is pretty good. And so I like those. They're easy to sharpen, high toughness, like I said, really good microstructure. The wear resistance isn't super high. So if you like sharpening and keeping a fine edge, then it's really good for those.
Absolutely.
But my homeboys, Crucible,
Yes.
they're ones that I really got into as a teenager, because I'd go to the knife shows and I'd go to their booth and I'd just throw tons of questions at them. And I knew very little about metallurgy. You know, I'm trying to learn everything I can.
Sure.
I have no degrees in metallurgy at the time.
Just a kid.
Yeah, and so and they were always great. And you know, S30V was kind of a turning point in the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
Where they really promoted it as a knife made for, or a steel made for knives.
Yes, exactly.
And then S35VN was kind of like a higher toughness, easier to work with version. And then of course I got to pump my own steel, CPM MagnaCut.
Yes, there we go.
Which is really an evolution of those prior grades.
Yep.
So if you look at S30V and S35VN and S110V, well, S90V was also before S30V. There's an evolution there where they're going higher toughness and they're getting closer to non-stainless type properties.
Exactly.
There's always this stainless versus carbon debate.
Yeah.
Because they've got different properties, and the stainless steels are always losing a couple of things to be stainless. So CPM MagnaCut, from my background in steel design and metallurgy and knowing the whole evolution of everything, I saw this area which had not been explored, which was, to get a little bit nerdy, we reduced the chromium.
Okay.
So you need chromium in the stainless steel to be corrosion resistant. It forms a chrome oxide layer at the surface. So when they wanted more corrosion resistance, they would add more chromium. But the more chromium you add in, you form chromium carbides, which are not really that desirable.
Okay.
As opposed to a non-stainless steel where they can get all of these really hard little vanadium and niobium carbides. So again, it's getting real nerdy.
Keep it going.
But
I love it.
The chromium carbides are softer, and they're also larger, even in a powder metallurgy steel. Powder metallurgy is the process to keep our carbides really small, but the chromium carbides will grow just during processing. Okay. So even though the powder made the carbides really small, during forging and annealing and everything, those carbides slowly grow, and the bigger they are, the lower your toughness is. Okay. So I reduced chromium and I reduced carbon so that we would eliminate the chromium carbides. Sure. And so all of the chromium is present in the steel instead of in carbides. And that gave properties that are the same as the best non-stainless steels. Okay. But stainless. So it's a really exciting jump in properties. It's literally double the toughness of those prior grades, M390, S35VN, double the toughness of those steels with similar edge retention. Yeah. Along with really high corrosion resistance, a little bit better than M390 and 20CV. Not quite to the level of Vanex and LC200N. Those are really high tier corrosion resistant steels. But anything outside of putting it in salt water for 2 days, it will survive just fine. That's incredible. It also gets to high hardness. The feedback from manufacturers so far is that it's really easy to work with. Yeah. So sometimes you make a steel and you're like, everything's good in my tests, but then something happens in manufacturing. Sure. We tried to work with this and it's just not doing it. Like we're grinding away everything and we're just ruining equipment. You never know if that's going to happen. Yes. So initial feedback is really good. They're saying it works really easy. And that more and more manufacturers are on board. Unfortunately, the steel's been so popular that we're completely sold out. Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. So everybody's excited about it. I'm excited about it. I can't wait for more knives to come out. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited because I developed it. But really, this is an evolution of prior work from lots of people. Sure. And I had some epiphanies based on my steel knowledge. Yeah. And I convinced Crucible and Niagara Specialty Metals to go for it. And it worked. So it normally with a big steel company, they've got research and they can make 50 pounds of steel, and they tried 10 different things. Crucible does not have a research department like that. Okay. They did before their bankruptcy back in 2009, and they restructured, and they're a leaner, meaner company now. Fantastic. Still making knife steel for everyone. But we didn't get 10 tries, we got 1 try. Yes. And so there was a good chance it wasn't going to work. So I'm very excited. That's fantastic. And I've had the opportunity to speak to people from Chris Reeve Knives this week already. Andrew Demko, both of them excited about MagnaCut. Demko mentioned that he has MagnaCut in his workshop right now that he's going to be using to produce some of his custom MGs. How exciting is that, just to hear about these big knife makers talking about
having in their possession the steel that was from your mind. Like, how exciting is that?
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal.
Yeah.
Even in my background with my dad making Damascus and knowing a lot of custom knife makers, my website and my book are a lot geared to custom knife makers.
Sure.
So the production companies feel like almost at another level. Like when I went to college at Colorado School of Mines, that's in Golden, Colorado, right near Spyder Cove.
Yep.
So I've had good relationship with different knife companies over the years, but making a steel that they actually use, it seems like a dream.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So hearing them be excited about it, them talking to me as a peer, as someone.
Oh yeah.
Looking to me for help on heat treating or steel selection. It's surreal. It's awesome.
It's fantastic. And it almost seems as if, like, when you get a new steel, such as S45VN, where it seems like almost like just the next iteration, like a small step forward in certain properties where you're taking a step back in other properties. Whereas when you're talking about MagnaCut, where I come from a chemistry background, so I'm going to say it like this, that chromium is in solution as opposed to in those chromium carbides. And you get those huge leaps in corrosion resistance while maintaining that fine grain and that like great edge retention and whatnot. So it almost seems like it's more of a paradigm shift as opposed to just an iterative step. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, and I use some steel modeling software when I started looking at different possibilities. And initially, I'm playing around with things, like looking at S30V, what if I move this here or move that there? And everything was just a little bit different than anything before. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything that exciting. I mean, there might be this little area over here where we could make a niche product that doesn't exist. But, it's not going to blow up. It's not going to be that exciting. And the more I kept thinking about things, I eventually there's this area over here, and we can really jump.
Yes.
And we can leapfrog over previous things. And come to think of it, I don't even know why no one's done this, but this is such a simple idea. Why hasn't it been done?
That's beautiful.
And I don't know if I don't think I'm just that much smarter than everyone else. I mean, there's not that much push from these steel companies to make stainless tool steels, really.
Yeah.
Crucible has been the main one that really wants to push new and better things. But some of these other companies, they're like, no, we have a product. We have this over here.
Yeah.
It's not a big runner. Why would we make a version 2?
Yes.
And so I don't think they really have the drive or the money in that area, even if a metallurgist was that interested in it. So I think I had the leg up in that, like, this was my focus.
Yes, absolutely.
I know everything about this little tiny area of steel. And I noticed, there's this hole right over here.
Yes.
And if we filled that hole, we could really have something awesome. And then, am I right? Or
will it work?
Or is it just going to blow up in my face? And then Crucible will say, we gave it a good try.
Yes.
Maybe in the future we'll say hi at Blade Show.
Yeah. It cost several $1,000s. Thanks for that kind of deal.
But no, it worked. And so,
That's fantastic. So just a couple more things. Like another kind of more subjective question, I guess, is what do you think is a knife steel in the community that's misrepresented? Something that either gets an amazing rap and maybe has a little bit more shortcomings than we give it credit for, or something that doesn't have such a good reputation that is something that we probably should be considering more often?
All right, well, we'll start with my least favorite.
Yes.
So the hottest steel right now is M390.
Sure.
I don't like M390. So
that's going to be a controversial opinion.
So it's got a really high carbide content. It's got a lot of large chromium carbides in it, and the toughness is just not there. So I mean, the edge retention is good. It has that, and it's also relatively easy to sharpen at that level.
Sure.
But when people sharpen something and they're like, hey, this isn't too bad, they sometimes interpret that as being high in toughness.
Sure.
I've had that argument to me several times even. But the steel is really old. It was developed in the 80s, and it looks like a steel developed in the 80s. So it's got a coarse structure, it's got high corrosion resistance, above average edge retention. So it does what it needs to do, but it's been overhyped to levels beyond what it is.
Okay.
So, is it a bad knife if it's an M390? No, it's a perfectly fine steel, but it's been hyped way beyond what it is.
Sure.
So then, there's a lot of non-stainless steels not many people know about. So there's been more growing interest in CPM crewwear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And CPM crewwear is great. I was going in a similar direction with MagnaCut. It's really in that same regime of properties, only stainless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But other steels in that range are Venatus 4 Extra and CPM 4V. Those also have great properties. Now they might be, replaceable by MagnaCut in a lot of ways now, but the non-stainless steels will always have a niche area that they excel in, and that's really high hardness.
Yeah.
So a 66, 67, 68 Rockwell is difficult or impossible to do with a stainless.
Absolutely.
The only steel out there that really does it is ZDP 189.
Okay.
And that steel is kind of being phased out over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I did corrosion resistance testing of that steel and I modeled it in software, seeing how is this getting high corrosion resistance and 68 Rockwell? Well, I learned that it is not a stainless. So it gets that high hardness by not being stainless, the same way other steels do it, because there's a balance between hardness and corrosion resistance.
Yes.
And so with MagnaCut, that was another exciting breakthrough, is we managed to get 64 Rockwell plus and really high corrosion resistance.
It's incredible.
So those are really difficult to do at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. And then just to finish out, I should say, what do you have in your pocket, or what do you have down by your feet?
Oh.
Show that thing off.
So I've got a large Sabenza in CPM MagnaCut. So they brought 10 of these limited edition. This is my glasses logo for Knife Steel Nerds.
That's fantastic.
So I've always loved Sabenzas. I bought a small Sabenza when I was a teenager years ago.
You still have it?
Yeah,
Good.
Yeah, I do.
Fantastic.
I've ruined a couple knives over the years, but my small Sabenza was not.
It survived.
Was not one of them. So I think Chris Reeve Knives is awesome.
Yep.
I got to talk to Tim Reeve today, and we've been corresponding a little bit on Instagram and things. He's been really excited about the steel.
Yes.
He's telling me it's working really well, and they sold out the knives in just minutes when the show started. So.
I'll have you know, we were standing there as they were selling out, right when the early bird kind of doors opened. People were sprinting to the CRK booth and asking for that knife with your logo on it.
It was amazing.
It's so cool. Very, very cool. Also, before we close out, do you have anything you want to promote? Socials, websites?
Yeah, well, I got knifesteelnerds.com.
Fantastic.
I got my Instagram, Knife Steel Nerds. I have my book, Knife Engineering. That book sold great. Everybody loves it. Just look at the Amazon reviews.
Yep.
And and if you're a knife maker, try to get some CPM MagnaCut. You won't be able to, but if you wait a few months, you can find some. So that's plugging enough stuff.
Fantastic. I love that you have a steel that is so hot it's selling out like some people's knives are selling out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, Larrin, thank you so much for taking the time. It was fantastic to meet you. We'll link his socials, the book, the website, the Instagram, everything down in the description. Make sure to give him a follow. Check out his book on Amazon. Thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you guys next time. Look forward to more content from Blade Show 2021.